Hello everybody, welcome to episode 31 of the Comic Source. This is another Wednesday Quick Hits episode. Just a couple of items in the news I thought were worth mentioning. Marvel released a new Avengers Age of Ultron poster that was focused on Iron Man, and Robert Downey Jr. said that in about 7 or 8 days he's going to have a big announcement that has to do with Iron Man. Meanwhile, over on the DC side of things, Batman Arkham Knight, which is going to be the first DC video game that has a mature rating, has a new trailer that you can check out here.
To Batman.
This game looks just awesome, and I know there's a lot of you out there that can't wait to play it.
The legend of the Batman will be worth nothing at all.
And finally, Disney announced that in 2017, DuckTales is going to return to the small screen. So I'm sure there's a lot of people out there from age about 32 to 40 that have fond memories of DuckTales. And now it looks like there'll be a whole new generation of fans. Okay, the first book I'm going to talk about is Cyberforce 11. This book was written by Mark Silvestri. The art is handled by Marco Torrini, and the colors are by Chris Northrup. Now, this latest volume of Cyberforce has basically been dealing with this extinction event that CDI, that's Cyber Data Industries, knows is going to take place. So they've taken it upon themselves to try to delay this extinction event so they can enact what's called the Aphrodite Protocol. Basically, it's a way to genetically and cybernetically enhance humans so that somebody or someones will be able to survive this extinction level event. The thing is, it's of their choosing, it's their machinations, it's their political back and forth that decides what's right for the human race. So it's a very interesting book. I would say it's definitely very political, but it's also packed full of action. So if you're looking for something a little different, this issue 11 is a great place to jump on. It's kind of a recap of the series so far, and I think there's going to be one more issue to come. The cool thing about it is Top Cow is also putting out the book Ninth Generation right now, and that kind of tells the future. So you can get the beginning of the story here in Cyberforce, and then you can see the results of it 700 years in the future in the Ninth Generation book. I love what Top Cow's doing with both these books right now. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is Thief of Thieves number 26. This comic is written by Andy Diggle, the art is by Sean Martinborough, and the colors are by Adriana Lucas. Now, much like Cyberforce 11, Thief of Thieves 26 is a great time to jump on. We've pretty much seen through every issue of Thief of Thieves to this point, it's been part of a bigger arc, either a 5 or 6 issue story. This one's kind of a standalone. Redmond kind of takes stock of his life, everything that's gone on up to this point, and he's kind of getting his bearings and seeing what comes next. I would say the first 25 issues, which were made up of either 4 or 5 story arcs, were actually part of an even bigger overall arc where Redmond was using his skills as a thief to get his son out of some trouble he was in. It feels like moving forward, the series is going to take a different turn, maybe a few more heists, a little more action, and Andy Diggle is a very smart writer, so I expect it to continue to be a great comic. I should also mention that Shane Martinborough's art fits it perfectly, and Adriana Lucas on the colors cannot get enough praise. The guy sets the mood. It's very Norrish. He gives it a real old school gangster feel. Okay, next up is Daredevil 13, written by Mark Waid. The art is by Chris Samney, and the colors are by Matthew Wilson. Now, for those of you that don't know, Matt Murdock, Daredevil, has pretty much revealed his secret identity to the world. He ended up staging an elaborate death for his old law partner, Foggy Nelson, so he wouldn't have to worry about his enemies coming for Foggy. But he's got a girlfriend now, Kirsten McDuffie, and as any Daredevil fan can tell you, Matt Murdock has definitely not been lucky in love. So in this issue, he certainly expresses concern for his current girlfriend and worries that his enemies are going to come after her. However, to her credit, she tells Matt that she's not made of glass and she'll take on all comers. So this was a really enjoyable issue. We saw an appearance by the Shroud, which may end up being more than it appears. The Shroud has always been a minor Marvel character at most, but in the hands of Mark Waid, it looks like he may just switch things up a bit. This is actually the first issue in the final arc of Mark Waid and Chris Samney's award-winning run on Daredevil. So I have a feeling they're going to go out with a bang, so this story is probably worth reading. Next up, much like last week, we have another title spinning out of the Spider-Verse crossover, SpiderGwen number 1, written by Jason Latour, with art by Robbie Rodriguez, and colors by Rico Renzi. Much like with Silk One, I didn't really care that much for this issue. It felt rushed. Spider-Gwen seems to be the hottest thing since Harley Quinn when it comes to female characters in comics these days. And Gwen Stacy certainly was always a beloved character in Spider-Man history. It may be one of those things where when someone dies young, they have this mystique, this aura, people remember them fondly. I think that might have a lot to do with it. Unfortunately, while I know that this Gwen Stacy is not the same one from those late 60s, early 70s Spider-Man comics, there's not enough of the old Gwen in this new Gwen to really remind me of her, which I guess is okay in its own right. She's established herself as her own character. But this issue was light on the characterization for Gwen. The art was really sloppy, and there was even less characterization in the villain, the Vulture. I have high hopes for this book because, as I said, with the popularity of Spider-Gwen and Marvel hoping to pull in some new female readers, this book really needs to be good so those new readers don't get discouraged and give up on comics altogether. So I'm not giving up on Spider-Gwen yet. I liked it more than Silk, but I guess my expectations were just a little too high. The next book I'm going to talk about is Secret Origins number 10 from DC. This actually had the origins of 3 characters, Batgirl, Firestorm, and Poison Ivy. The Batgirl segment was written by Cameron Stewart and Brendan Fleischer. Those are the same 2 writers that are on the current Batgirl series, and the pencils were handled by Irene Coe, whose art was very similar to Babs Tarr, the regular artist on Batgirl, maybe just a little less polished. But I thought she did a pretty good job, and it worked well for the story. What the story didn't do was give me a lot of answers that I was hoping to get. For those of you not familiar with what's going on in the regular Batgirl series right now, Barbara Gordon has been confronted with the fact that there's another Batgirl behind the scenes manipulating her and really making her life difficult. At the end of issue 38, we learned that there seems to be another Barbara Gordon in cyberspace who's been behind all the recent troubles for the actual out in the real world Barbara Gordon. So I was really hoping to get some answers and find out what exactly is going on, but this part of the issue felt more like a stepping stone into Batgirl 40, where I'm sure we'll get all the answers Batgirl fans are looking for. The second feature was actually my favorite, The Origin of Firestorm. Dan Jurgens handled the writing chores, Sean Chen was on pencils, Mark Morales handled the inks, and Romulo Fajarad Jr. was on colors. I'll just say one thing real quick about the colors. I'm not familiar with Fajarad Jr. at all, but he did a really bang-up job. He managed to vary the reds and oranges of Firestorm just subtly enough between each page and contrast it with some deep dark blues, and it really made Firestorm jump off the page. As far as the actual story goes, it was pretty much a recap of all the events of Firestorm's life in the New 52 up until this point. But what Jurgens did really well is he managed to interject a lot of characterization with both Jason Rusch and Ronnie Raymond. What I found particularly interesting is in all the announcements of books coming in June, there was no mention of a Firestorm book. So I find it interesting that DC chose Firestorm to be in this latest issue of Secret Origins and gave a very detailed history of pretty much everything he's done in the New 52 up to this point. The final feature in the book was the Poison Ivy origin, written by Christy Marks, and the art was handled by Stefan Sejic. I'm a big fan of Sejic's art, as most of you probably know, but what really stood out in his art for me in this story was the colors. A lot of deep greens, a lot of earth tones. It really suited Poison Ivy's story because, as we know, Poison Ivy's all about nature. Christy Marks did a pretty good job telling the story. She certainly did a great job of explaining Poison Ivy's motivations, and you really understand why Ivy does the things she does. The New 52 Poison Ivy is much less of an outright villain than we've seen Poison Ivy be in the past. I'm not sure if that's due to her friendship with Harley Quinn, or just DC consciously trying to blur the lines and make Poison Ivy more of a gray character. And by that I mean someone who's not necessarily a strict black or white hero or villain. So if you haven't been reading Secret Origins, it's a book I definitely recommend. You can learn a lot about the New 52 versions of DC characters, what little subtleties and things that have changed, and there's often 2 or 3 stories per issue, so it's definitely good value for your money. The final book I'm going to talk about is Suiciders #1 by Lee Bermejo, and this is actually my book of the week. This is from DC's Vertigo imprint, and I was really blown away by this book. Not just the style of art that Bermejo brings to it, but the overall original story idea that he came up with. Both in the art and the story, Bermejo does an exceptional job of creating this world that seems to be at extremes with itself. And by that I mean, the setting is New Angeles, which is actually Los Angeles after the big earthquake finally hit California. So that earthquake was many years in the past, and we learned that after the earthquake hit, the US government decided to abandon Los Angeles. They built a big wall around it, and from what we can gather, it was a pretty miserable, desperate, and bleak place. However, that's not how things are nowadays. It seems that the survivors have managed to create some sort of utopia where cosmetic surgeries and physical enhancements seem to be the rule rather than the exception. Also in this environment is a gladiator-type reality TV show called Suiciders, where the comic gets its name from, and it seems to be possibly the biggest TV show of all time. The main character is named Saint, and he's perhaps the greatest champion of these Suicider matches. And we also see a couple try to sneak into New Angeles, hoping to make a better life for themselves. So it's going to be very interesting to find out how Los Angeles became New Angeles, how it went from a desperate, destroyed city to this somewhat utopia. Yet that utopia is in stark contrast to the actual reality of the world, which seems very mechanical, very dirty, very stark, and I'm sure it won't quite turn out to be the utopia that we might think here in the first issue. Likewise, I hope we get a better look at the outside world, because it'll be interesting to see how things have gotten so bad out there that people are willing to risk their lives to sneak into New Angeles. And much like all these dichotomies in the stories, Bermejo's art is also at odds with itself. The clean lines, the great storytelling from panel to panel, the beautiful rendering, and even the peaceful colors give a real beautiful look to Bermejo's art, which is in stark contrast to the actual ugliness of the world that he's portraying, especially during the battle between the Saint and his opponent. So do yourself a favor, go out and pick up Suiciders 1. It's really a great book, an original idea, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. Just a few other books I want to mention that came out Wednesday, February 28th. Batman 39, written by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, is the next to last issue of the Endgame story arc, where Batman is learning that the Joker may be more than he seems. Also, Flash 39, written by Robert Venditti with art by Brett Booth, has Barry Allen still trapped in the Speed Force trying to return to Central City. Chew 46, written by Jonathan Lehman with art by Rob Giori, has Tony Chew get a new partner, a new boss, a new storyline, and a lot of new problems. The Wicked and Divine number 8 is getting a lot of attention from a lot of people, and this is a great jumping on issue if you've wanted to check it out. It's written by Kieran Gillen with art by Jamie McKelvey, and this issue 8 is set at a rave with all the gods present and the main character Laura kind of going around and interacting with them all. So as I said, it's a great chance to jump on and kind of meet the characters and see who's who. Amazing Spider-Man 15, written by Dan Slott with art by Giuseppe Camuncoli, is actually an epilogue to the big Spider-Verse crossover that just ended. And finally, Darth Vader number 2, also written by Kieran Gillen with art by Salvador LaRocca and colors by Edgar Delgado, continues to follow Lord Vader as he attempts to track down the pilot from the Death Star battle, who is very strong in the Force, while being in the Emperor's doghouse. I thought this issue was actually a lot better than the first issue, and it set up a possible power struggle between Vader and Grand Admiral Tag. So I want to thank everybody for watching. Don't forget, coming up this weekend, Saturday, February 28th and Sunday, March 1st, Manny and I will be at the Long Beach Comic Expo in Long Beach, California. There's a ton of great guests, a lot of really big names in the world of cosplay. As I said, Manny and I will be there with our Top Cow Chronology t-shirts on. So if you spot us, come up and say hi. We'll see you then.